That morning, she arrived at 5 a.m. as always, her keys barely making a sound against the mahogany door of the Hartwell mansion. Elena Vasquez had perfected the art of being invisible. 23 years of cleaning other people's lives had taught her that silence was her greatest asset. The marble floors gleamed under her careful touch, the crystal chandeliers sparkled without a single fingerprint, and the Persian rugs lay pristine and undisturbed. To the Hartwells she was furniture with a heartbeat, a shadow that moved through their world without leaving a trace. She had no idea that today her invisibility would become her most powerful weapon. The mansion stood like a fortress against the Seattle skyline, its glass walls reflecting the grey morning light. Inside, 43 rooms sprawled across 15,000 square feet of carefully curated wealth. Elena knew every corner, every hidden passage, every secret that the walls had whispered over the decades. She had raised her 3 children on what she earned here, sending them to college, while scrubbing the toilets of people who wouldn't remember her name if their lives depended on it. In the master's suite, Victoria Hartwell slept until noon, her designer sleep mask shielding her from the reality that others lived differently. 25 years old and carved from ambition and silicone, she had married tech billionaire Marcus Hartwell 8 months ago. A fairy tale wedding that cost more than Elena would earn in a lifetime. The tabloids called her a visionary philanthropist. Elena knew better. She had cleaned up the evidence of Victoria's real nature more times than she could count. Marcus himself was 62, silver-haired, and sharp as the blade that had carved his path to the top of the tech world. He had built Hartwell Industries from nothing, turning a garage startup into a global empire worth $40 billion. The man who employed Elena had never spoken directly to her, not once in over 2 decades. She was contacted through his assistant, paid through automatic transfer, and acknowledged only when something went wrong. But Elena saw everything. She saw the late-night meetings in the study where Marcus and his partners discussed mergers that would eliminate thousands of jobs. She witnessed Victoria's screaming tantrums when photographers caught her at the wrong angle. She cleaned the office where sensitive documents were left scattered across mahogany desks, documents that contained information worth millions to the right people or the wrong ones. Most importantly, she noticed that the study's antique French clock had been broken for 6 months. Its hidden recording device, installed by a paranoid Marcus to monitor his staff, had been secretly repaired by Elena's electrician brother 3 years ago. Marcus had never bothered to check if it worked. Why would he? Elena was invisible. The first crack in her carefully constructed world came on a Tuesday morning in November. She was polishing the silver in the dining room when she heard raised voices echoing from the study. Nothing unusual, the Hartwells fought constantly, but something in the tone made her pause, dust cloth frozen in her hand. "You can't be serious about this merger," Victoria's voice carried through the heavy oak door, sharp with panic. "If the EPA finds out what happened in Portland—" "They won't," Marcus interrupted, his voice low and dangerous. "The environmental reports have been sanitized. The cancer cluster near the plant will be attributed to other factors. We have people handling it." Elena's blood turned to ice. Cancer cluster. Her sister Rosa lived in Portland, just miles from the Hartwell Industries chemical plant. Rosa, who had been battling leukemia for 2 years. Rosa, whose doctors couldn't explain why so many people in her neighborhood were getting sick. She pressed closer to the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Besides," Marcus continued, his voice growing closer as he moved around the room, "once we merge with Chen Industries, we'll have enough political leverage to bury any investigation. Senator Davidson owes us. His campaign was practically funded by our PAC. The EPA director's son works for us. They'll classify the reports, and if someone talks—" Victoria's voice was thin, worried. Who would talk? The workers were all immigrants, mostly illegals. Half of them died in the accident anyway. The other half won't risk deportation by speaking up. As for the environmental data, Marcus paused, and Elena could hear papers rustling. Dr. Reeves at the university has been very cooperative in adjusting the findings. Amazing what a research grant can accomplish. Elena's hands were shaking now. The accident. 3 years ago, 27 workers had died in an explosion at the Portland plant. The official report blamed a gas leak. Newspapers had covered it for a week, then moved on. She remembered because Rosa had called crying, saying that families in their neighborhood were being torn apart by unexplained deaths. "The merger happens in 2 weeks," Marcus said firmly. "Chen Industries will take responsibility for all environmental liabilities. Their shell companies in the Cayman Islands will absorb any future lawsuits. We walk away clean, and I walk away $40 billion richer." Elena understood now why her sister was dying, why 27 families had lost fathers, brothers, husbands, why an entire community was being poisoned while Marcus Hartwell added another 0 to his net worth. She understood. And she had proof. The broken clock in the study had been recording every word. That evening, Elena sat in her small apartment in South Seattle, staring at the tiny digital recorder her brother had shown her how to access. 23 years of conversations, thousands of hours of admissions, conspiracy, evidence that could bring down not just Marcus Hartwell, but an entire network of corruption that reached into the highest levels of government. Her phone rang. It was Rosa, calling from the hospital. "Elena." Her sister's voice was weak, worn thin by chemotherapy and false hope. "The doctors say it is not working anymore." "The treatment. I don't have much time." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 23 years of silence pressing down on her shoulders. She had cleaned up their messes, invisible and ignored, while they poisoned her family and destroyed countless lives. Not anymore. The next morning, Elena arrived at the mansion earlier than usual. She moved through her routine with mechanical precision, but her mind was racing. She had spent the night copying files, organizing audio recordings, building a case that would be impossible to ignore. She had reached out to an investigative journalist she had read about, a woman who specialized in corporate corruption. The meeting was set for tomorrow, but Victoria Hartwell had other plans. "Elena," the voice cut through the morning silence like a blade. Elena looked up from the marble floor she was polishing to find Victoria standing at the top of the grand staircase, her face flushed with rage. "Get up here. Now." Elena had never been summoned like this. In 23 years, her interactions with the family had been limited to brief nods and written instructions left on the kitchen counter, but something in Victoria's voice made her stomach clench with dread. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing in the vast foyer. Victoria waited for her in the master bedroom, no longer the polished socialite from the magazines. Her blonde hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her designer robe hung open over expensive lingerie. But it was her eyes that made Elena step back, wild, desperate, and filled with something that looked like triumph. 23 years, Victoria said, her voice deceptively calm. 23 years you've been creeping around this house, thinking nobody notices. But I notice everything, Elena. Everything? Elena's mouth was dry. I don't understand, Mrs. Hartwell, don't you? Victoria walked to the wall safe behind the Monet painting. Elena watched in growing horror as Victoria opened the safe and pulled out an antique jewelry box. My grandmother's emerald necklace worth about $2 million, family heirloom, irreplaceable. She turned to face Elena, the jewelry box cradled in her arms like a weapon. It is missing. I wouldn't. Of course you would, Victoria interrupted, her voice rising. You've been here for decades, barely making minimum wage, watching us live like kings while you scrape by. The temptation must have been unbearable, so you finally snapped. You stole from us." Elena felt the world tilting around her. "Mrs. Hartwell, I swear to you, I've already called the police," Victoria said, her smile sharp and victorious. "They're on their way. Marcus is flying back from Silicon Valley to press charges personally." "Did you really think we wouldn't notice? Did you think you could just steal from us and disappear?" Elena's mind was reeling. She had never stolen anything in her life. The necklace she had cleaned around that safe hundreds of times, but she had never even touched the jewelry box. This was a setup, but why? Why now? Then she understood. Victoria had seen something yesterday. Maybe she had noticed Elena listening at the door, or maybe she had simply become paranoid. But somehow Victoria knew that Elena represented a threat. "The police will find the necklace in your apartment," Victoria continued, her voice matter-of-fact. Amazing how these things turn up in the most obvious places. "And of course, we'll have to let you go immediately, no references, obviously. In fact, I think I'll make sure that every wealthy family in Seattle knows exactly what kind of person you are. You'll never work in this city again." Elena felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. This woman, this spoiled child who had never worked a day in her life, was going to destroy her. 23 years of faithful service meant nothing. The merger with Chen Industries meant billions for Marcus, but Elena's silence was apparently worth even more. "Please," Elena whispered, hating herself for the desperation in her voice. "I have children, grandchildren. I need this job." Victoria's smile widened. "You should have thought of that before you decided to steal from us." The doorbell rang downstairs. The police had arrived. Elena stood in the opulent bedroom, surrounded by wealth that could feed her entire neighborhood for years, and felt the full weight of her invisibility. She was about to be arrested for a crime she didn't commit, framed by people who had poisoned her sister and 27 families, while the evidence that could expose them sat in her apartment. But they had made one critical mistake. They assumed she would go quietly. Detective Ray Morrison was a 20-year veteran of the Seattle PD, and he had seen this scenario before. Wealthy family claims theft. Undocumented worker gets blamed. Everyone moves on. It was ugly, but it was routine. What wasn't routine was the calm dignity of the woman sitting across from him in the Hartwell mansion's living room. Elena Vasquez sat with her hands folded in her lap, her back straight, her dark eyes clear and unflinching. She had been given her rights, and she had waived her ride to a lawyer, something that immediately put Morrison on alert. In his experience, innocent people demanded lawyers. Guilty people either confessed immediately or clammed up, but this woman seemed to be waiting for something. "Mrs. Vasquez," Morrison began, glancing at his notes, "Mrs. Hartwell here says that a valuable necklace has gone missing from their bedroom safe. She believes you may have taken it." "I understand what she believes," Elena said quietly. "I did not take the necklace." Victoria Hartwell sat on the designer sofa like a queen holding court, her earlier dishevelment replaced by perfect makeup and a black designer dress that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent. "Detective, I hate to say this, but Elena has been acting strangely lately. Nervous, secretive. Yesterday I caught her lurking outside my husband's study during a private business meeting. Elena's heart jumped, but she kept her expression neutral, so Victoria had seen her. "Is that true, Mrs. Vasquez?" Morrison asked. "I was cleaning the dining room," Elena replied. "The door to the study was open. I heard voices. And what did you hear?" Morrison leaned forward, his instincts telling him there was more to this story. Victoria stood up abruptly. "Detective, I hardly think Elena's eavesdropping on private conversations helps her case. The fact is, a valuable item is missing, and Elena was the only person with access to our bedroom safe. How exactly would Mrs. Vasquez have accessed your safe? Morrison asked, his cop instincts pinging. The safe was clearly sophisticated, requiring both a combination and a fingerprint scan. Victoria hesitated for just a fraction of a second. She must have watched me open it. I sometimes access it when she is cleaning the bedroom. Morrison looked at Elena, who was watching Victoria with an expression of quiet sadness rather than anger. Mrs. Vasquez, have you ever seen Mrs. Hartwell open this safe? No, Elena said simply. Mrs. Hartwell sleeps until noon most days. I finish the master bedroom by 8 a.m. The lie hung in the air between them. Morrison had been a detective long enough to smell deception, and something about this whole scenario stunk. He was about to probe deeper when his radio crackled. Detective Morrison, we need you downtown immediately. Federal matter. Morrison frowned. Federal matter? He was investigating a simple theft case in a mansion. But when the FBI calls, you answer. I am going to need to continue this conversation downtown, Morrison said, standing up. Mrs. Vasquez, I'll need you to come with me for further questioning. As they walked toward the door, Elena turned back to Victoria. Mrs. Hartwell, she said quietly, I hope you find what you are really looking for. Victoria's face flushed red, but before she could respond, Elena was gone. 20 minutes later, Elena sat in an FBI field office, staring across a metal table at Special Agent Sarah Chen. No relation to the Chen Industries that Marcus was planning to merge with, as she had carefully explained. Agent Chen was young, sharp-eyed, and had the kind of focused intensity that reminded Elena of her own daughter when she was studying for the bar exam. Mrs. Vasquez, Agent Chen began, Detective Morrison tells me you were arrested for theft, but something about the case didn't sit right with him. He called us because your name appeared in one of our ongoing investigations. Elena felt her heart skip. Investigation. We've been looking into Hartwell Industries for 18 months, Agent Chen continued. Specifically, we've been investigating potential violations of environmental law, corporate fraud, and conspiracy. The problem is Marcus Hartwell is very careful, very smart, and very well connected. She paused, studying Elena's face, but we have reason to believe that evidence might exist. Evidence that someone with access to the Hartwell home might have been able to collect. Elena understood the broken clock, the recordings. 23 years of invisible observation had finally found its purpose. Agent Chen, Elena said quietly, if I were to help you, what would happen to my family? My sister is dying, and I have grandchildren who depend on me. If Marcus Hartwell wanted to destroy us, Mrs. Vasquez, if you have evidence of the crimes we suspect, Marcus Hartwell would be in federal prison, Agent Chen replied. He would be in no position to hurt anyone. Elena thought of Rosa, lying in a hospital bed, poisoned by the greed of a man who had never even learned her name. She thought of 27 families who had lost their fathers and husbands. She thought of the community in Portland that was being slowly killed while Marcus counted his billions. She thought of Victoria Hartwell sitting in her mansion, confident that she had silenced the only witness who could expose them. Agent Chen, Elena said, reaching into her purse, I think you are going to want to hear this. The raid on the Hartwell mansion began at dawn. Elena watched from an FBI surveillance van as 26 federal agents swarmed the property she had called home for over 2 decades. They moved with military precision, sealing exits, securing evidence, and executing search warrants that would turn Marcus Hartwell's carefully constructed empire into a crime scene. Agent Chen sat beside her, monitoring radio communications and coordinating with teams that were simultaneously raiding Hartwell Industries offices, Chen Industries headquarters, Senator Davidson's home, and the university laboratory where Dr. Reeves had been falsifying environmental data. Phoenix team report. Agent Chen spoke into her radio. "We've secured the study," came the crackling response. "The recording device is exactly where Mrs. Vasquez said it would be. 23 years of conversations. We're going to need a bigger truck." Elena closed her eyes, feeling 23 years of invisible anger finally finding its voice. Through the van's tinted windows, she watched as Marcus Hartwell was led from his home in handcuffs. The billionaire who had never spoken to her, who had destroyed her sister's community for profit, walked past her hiding place without ever knowing that his downfall had been orchestrated by the woman who cleaned his toilets. Victoria Hartwell stood in the mansion's doorway, her perfect facade crumbling as she watched her fairy tale life disintegrate in real time. FBI agents were carrying boxes of evidence from every room of the house: financial records, correspondence, and, most damaging of all, a jewelry box they had found hidden in Victoria's personal safe. The emerald necklace was never missing. It had been a desperate attempt to silence Elena before she could reveal what she knew. But the attempt had backfired spectacularly, drawing exactly the kind of attention Victoria had been trying to avoid. Agent Chen handed Elena a tablet showing news headlines that were already breaking across the country. Tech billionaire arrested in massive corruption scandal: Hartwell Industries, accused of covering up environmental disasters, 27 dead, hundreds poisoned, the Portland cover-up. "Mrs. Vasquez," Agent Chen said gently, "I want you to know that your sister Rosa is going to receive the best medical treatment available. The government will ensure that every family affected by the Portland disaster receives full compensation. And, as a federal witness, you and your family will be protected." Elena nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on the mansion. She was thinking about Rosa, who would finally get the treatment she needed. She was thinking about the 27 families who would finally get justice. She was thinking about the community in Portland that would finally know the truth about why their children were dying. But mostly she was thinking about invisibility. For 23 years, Elena had moved through the world of the wealthy like a ghost, unseen and unheard. The very quality that had made her vulnerable, her invisibility, had also made her powerful. While Marcus and Victoria had plotted and schemed, convinced that their wealth made them untouchable, they had ignored the one person who was watching everything. The cleaning lady had cleaned up more than just their messes. She had cleaned up their crimes. 6 months later, Elena received a letter forwarded through the FBI's Witness Protection Program. It was from Rosa. "My dear sister," the letter began, "the doctors say the cancer is in remission. The new treatment is working, and I am finally hopeful about the future. But more importantly, I wanted you to know what your courage has meant to our community. The families of the 27 men who died have received settlements that will ensure their children can go to college. The EPA is cleaning up the chemical contamination, and new safety measures mean no other families will suffer like ours did. The man who killed our neighbors is spending the rest of his life in prison where he belongs. You gave up everything to tell the truth. Your job, your home, your life in Seattle, but Elena, you saved us all. You saved our entire community. I know you think you were invisible for all those years, but you were wrong. We saw you. We've always seen you. And now the whole world sees you as what you truly are, a hero." Elena folded the letter and placed it in the box with the others. Letters from the families of the Portland 27 thanking her for giving them justice. Letters from environmental groups calling her a champion. Letters from women's organizations holding her up as an example of courage in the face of impossible odds. She was no longer invisible. But sometimes, late at night in her small apartment in Portland, where she now lived close to Rosa and her grandchildren, Elena wondered about the cost of visibility. Marcus Hartwell had died in federal prison, a heart attack brought on by the stress of his conviction. Victoria was serving 25 years for conspiracy and fraud, her beauty fading in an orange jumpsuit. The mansion stood empty now, seized by the government and scheduled to be sold at auction. 43 rooms that had once housed unimaginable wealth now stood as monuments to the price of corruption. Elena had won. Justice had been served. The guilty had been punished. But late at night she sometimes wondered, in a world where the powerful prey on the powerless, is true justice ever possible? Or does each victory simply clear the way for new predators to take the place of the old ones? The questions haunted her sleep, reminders that even the most satisfying revenge cannot undo the years of suffering that came before it. But in the morning, when she woke to the sound of her grandchildren playing in the apartment next door, when she saw Rosa cooking breakfast in her own kitchen for the first time in 3 years, when she read letters from families who had found peace because she had found her voice, in those moments Elena knew the answer. Justice was worth the price of visibility, and the cleaning lady's secret had finally cleaned them all.